Laughter cuts through the silence at Veterans Memorial Park. An elderly woman dripping with beer struggles to her feet before a monument, wiping her face. She doesn't know her presence today will forever change this town. Eleanor Thompson parked her modest Buick at the edge of Veterans Memorial Park, the autumn leaves crunching beneath her worn shoes. At 70, her once straight posture had yielded to time, her back slightly hunched, her silver hair thin but neatly combed. She wore a simple navy cardigan over a white blouse, practical khaki pants, and sensible shoes, nothing that would draw attention. Beside her walked Frank Miller, a 75-year-old veteran whose eyesight had been damaged during Vietnam. He held her arm not just for support, but for guidance. They carried a small wreath of white lilies between them. "Same spot as always, Frank," she said softly, guiding him toward the Special Operations Memorial Stone. Eleanor had been visiting this monument every October 18 for 15 years, the anniversary of the operation that claimed the lives of 7 of her soldiers. To most locals, she was just another elderly visitor paying respects, perhaps a widow or a mother of a fallen soldier. No one would guess she had once commanded the very unit being honored on that stone. As Eleanor and Frank approached the memorial, the rumble of motorcycles disrupted the park's tranquility. A group of 8 men in leather jackets had parked their bikes directly beside the memorial area, playing loud music, drinking beer, and laughing raucously. "Excuse me," Eleanor called over, her voice firm but polite. "Would you mind moving a bit farther from the memorial? This is a place for quiet reflection." The group's laughter paused. A tall man with a shaved head and tattooed arms, Kyle Duncan, local troublemaker, looked her up and down with open disdain. "Public park, Grandma," he sneered. "We got as much right to be here as you." Eleanor straightened her hunched back as much as she could. "I understand, but this is a memorial for fallen soldiers. I'm just asking for a little respect." "Oh, respect," Kyle mocked, walking toward her. "You one of those military wives come and cry over hubby's picture?" "I served for 32 years, actually," Eleanor replied quietly. This triggered howls of laughter from the group. Kyle circled her like a predator. "You? Military." He looked at his friends. "Hey, boys, G.I. Jane here says she was in the Army." Frank tensed beside her. "Eleanor, let's just—" "What?" "They let grannies into the Army to bake cookies." Kyle continued, emboldened by his friend's laughter. "What did you do?" "Sew buttons on uniforms." When Eleanor remained silent, dignified, Kyle's amusement turned to irritation. He stepped closer, beer can in hand. "I'm talking to you, Army lady. What unit? Where do you serve?" "Let me guess, the Knitting Corps?" Eleanor met his gaze. 5th Special Forces Group. Kyle's face darkened. In one swift movement, he appended his beer can over her head. Cold liquid cascaded down her face, soaking her hair and clothes. "Special Forces my ass," he growled, shoving her backward. She fell hard, her hip hitting the ground. Frank stumbled, trying to help her. Kyle kicked over their wreath, scattering the white lilies across the memorial stones. Eleanor sat on the ground for a long moment, beer dripping from her silver hair. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from a deep, controlled fury she hadn't felt in decades. Several bystanders watched from a distance, phones out, recording but not intervening. "Ma'am, should I call the police?" a teenage boy asked hesitantly from several feet away. Eleanor slowly rose to her feet, ignoring the pain shooting through her hip. She helped Frank regain his balance first, making sure he was steady before attending to herself. "Are you hurt, Eleanor?" Frank whispered, his clouded eyes searching for her face. "I'm fine," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. She pulled a handkerchief from her pocket and wiped her face, then reached for her phone. She dialed a number from memory, turned away from the still laughing bikers, and spoke just 3 sentences. "Memorial Park. Situation requires attention. Authentication code Delta November 7. She ended the call, pocketed her phone, and methodically began collecting the scattered lilies, arranging them back into their wreath. Despite her soaked clothes and the laughter still echoing behind her, she continued her task with military precision, refusing to abandon her mission or her dignity. 23 minutes later, Eleanor had checked her watch. The distant sound of engines drew everyone's attention. Not motorcycles this time, but the distinctive rumble of military-grade vehicles. 3 black Humvees and 4 unmarked SUVs entered the park perimeter, driving directly onto the grass with official disregard for normal rules. Kyle and his friends stopped laughing. What the hell? From the vehicles emerged 16 men and women in various uniforms. Some in military police gear, others in the distinctive dress blues of high-ranking officers. They moved with practiced efficiency, quickly establishing a perimeter around the memorial area. Time to roll, Kyle muttered to his friends, but as they mounted their bikes, 2 military police officers stepped directly in their path. No one leaves, one stated flatly. From the center Humvee, a tall man with silver hair and a chest full of ribbons emerged. Major General William Hayes, commander of the Army Special Operations Command, walked directly to Eleanor, ignoring everyone else. Despite her soaked clothes and disheveled appearance, he stopped precisely 2 feet in front of her and rendered a perfect salute. "Colonel Thompson," he said, his voice carrying across the now silent park. "My apologies for the delayed response to your call." Eleanor returned the salute with military precision that belied her age and current condition. Kyle's face drained of color. "Colonel?" Behind the general came the town's police chief and mayor, both looking distinctly uncomfortable. The chief glanced from Eleanor to Kyle, his expression hardening as understanding dawned. "Would someone explain what's happening?" the mayor demanded, straightening his tie nervously. General Hayes turned. "You have a situation involving the assault of a decorated American war hero, and I'm here to ensure it's handled appropriately. For those unaware," General Hayes announced, his voice carrying across the memorial grounds, "you're in the presence of Colonel Eleanor Thompson, retired, former commander of Special Operations Detachment Delta's Intelligence Division, and one of the most decorated female officers in U.S. military history." The mayor's mouth opened and closed without sound. Colonel Thompson led operations in Panama, Iraq, and Afghanistan that remain classified to this day. Hayes continued. She was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, 3 Silver Stars, and numerous other commendations that I'm not at liberty to fully disclose. Eleanor stood silently, dignity intact despite her beer-soaked appearance. Currently, Colonel Thompson serves as Special Advisor to the Secretary of Defense on Veterans Affairs, with direct access to the Pentagon and White House. Kyle had backed against his motorcycle, face ashen. The friends who had laughed with him minutes ago now stood apart, distancing themselves. A woman in civilian clothes stepped forward, opening a leather portfolio. "I'm Catherine Reeves, Department of Defense. Colonel Thompson was here today for the annual memorial service honoring Operation Kingfisher, a classified mission that resulted in the rescue of 37 American hostages and the loss of 7 special operators, all under her command." Frank spoke up, his voice breaking slightly. "I was there. She saved my life and the lives of everyone in my unit when we were captured. She never left anyone behind." 2 more vehicles arrived, disgorging several older men and women, all standing at attention. Eleanor nodded at them. Her former team members, the survivors of Operation Kingfisher. "Those flowers," Eleanor finally said, pointing to the reassembled wreath, "are for Captain James Miller, Lieutenant Sarah Rodriguez, Sergeant Michael Chun, and 4 others whose names I speak every night before I sleep." The park had grown crowded now. Bystanders filmed with phones. Local news crews had arrived. Through it all, Eleanor stood straight, her earlier stoop less pronounced, as if the weight of her hidden identity had been partially lifted. The police chief turned to Kyle. "Mr. Duncan, you're under arrest for assault of a federal official." The county courthouse was packed 3 days later. Kyle Duncan sat beside his attorney, staring at the floor as the judge entered. Eleanor, now in a simple but immaculate pantsuit, sat in the front row, flanked by General Hayes and several of her former team members. "Mr. Duncan," the judge began, "you're charged with assault on a federal official, a felony carrying up to 8 years imprisonment. How do you plead?" Kyle's attorney stood. "Your Honor, my client wishes to plead guilty and throw himself on the mercy of the court." The proceedings continued with the prosecutor detailing the incident. When sentencing approached, the judge looked at Eleanor. "Colonel Thompson, as the victim, would you like to make a statement?" Eleanor rose slowly and approached the stand. The courtroom fell silent. "Your Honor, I've seen enough young people in prison during my career," she began. "I don't believe incarceration is appropriate in this case." Murmurs rippled through the room. "Instead, I would suggest alternative sentencing," she continued. "First, I request that Mr. Duncan complete 800 hours of community service at the Veterans Administration Hospital, working directly with wounded warriors who've sacrificed for this country." The judge nodded, making notes. "Second, I ask that he assist in establishing a new program in our community, a Veterans Resource Center that will serve as both a memorial and support facility for returning service members." Kyle looked up, confused by the unexpected turn. And finally, Eleanor said, making direct eye contact with Kyle for the first time since the incident, "I require a public commitment from city officials to improve security and respect at all veterans memorials and to implement educational programs about military service in our schools." The mayor, seated nearby, nodded vigorously. The judge considered these recommendations, then addressed Kyle. "Mr. Duncan, Colonel Thompson has offered you something rare, a chance to make amends rather than waste years behind bars. Do you accept these terms?" Kyle stood, visibly shaken. "Yes, Your Honor." And he turned toward Eleanor. "I want to apologize. I was ignorant and cruel. I'm sorry." Eleanor acknowledged him with a slight nod. The judge finalized the sentence according to Eleanor's recommendations, adding mandatory counseling and a $5,000 contribution to proposed Veterans Center. As the courtroom emptied, reporters swarmed Eleanor, but she declined interviews. Instead, she joined her fellow veterans outside, where they stood in a tight circle, officers and enlisted, old and young, united by service and sacrifice that most civilians would never fully understand. Within a week, Eleanor's story had spread nationwide. Major networks ran special segments on female veterans and their often overlooked contributions. Social media exploded with hashtag #IServe2Stories from women veterans sharing similar experiences of disbelief and disrespect. The Veterans Resource Center project quickly exceeded its funding goals. Donations poured in from around the country, and construction began within a month. The mayor, recognizing a political opportunity, became its most vocal champion. Kyle's community service became unexpectedly meaningful. Initially resistant, he found himself humbled by the wounded warriors he assisted. Men and women missing limbs, bearing scars, yet retaining their dignity and purpose. He stopped wearing his motorcycle gang jacket after the second week. Schools throughout the district implemented the Veterans in History program, inviting service members to share their experiences. Eleanor declined at first, but eventually agreed to speak at the high school where the incident had been widely viewed on social media. The assembly hall fell silent as she took the stage. Without notes, she spoke for 30 minutes about service sacrifice and the changing role of women in the military. She mentioned neither Kyle nor the incident that had brought her there. "The uniform doesn't make the soldier," she concluded. "Sometimes the greatest warriors look like your grandparents, your neighbors, your teachers. Respect isn't reserved for those in uniform. It's for everyone who served, whether you can see their battle scars or not." Local veterans reported subtle changes in how they were treated. More respect at businesses, more acknowledgement in public spaces. The Memorial Park, once relatively neglected, became a centerpiece of community pride. A security camera system was installed, and volunteer guardians ensured its sanctity was preserved. The ripples of that beer-soaked confrontation continued to spread, changing perceptions one mind at a time. 1 year later, Eleanor stood at the podium in the newly completed Veterans Resource Center, addressing the inaugural class of community volunteers. The modern building featured a memorial wall, community spaces, and support services for veterans transitioning to civilian life. In the back row, almost unrecognizable in a button-down shirt and khakis, sat Kyle Duncan. He was in his 10th month of community service, now voluntarily coordinating transportation for elderly veterans to medical appointments. "Service doesn't end when we take off the uniform," Eleanor said, her posture straighter these days, her voice strong despite her 71 years. "For many, that's when the hardest battle begins. the return to society that often doesn't understand what we've experienced or what we have to offer. She surveyed the room, noting with satisfaction the diverse group, young and old, men and women of various backgrounds, united by their commitment to supporting veterans. A year ago, I experienced firsthand how invisible veterans can become, particularly women who served. That day brought pain, but also possibility. Look around you. This center exists because communities can change when confronted with truth. After the formal presentation, Eleanor approached Kyle, who stood awkwardly by the refreshment table. "Colonel Thompson," he nodded respectfully. "The transportation program has 20 volunteer drivers now." "Good work, Mr. Duncan," she replied, her tone professional but not cold. "I'll never be able to truly make up for what I did," he said quietly. Eleanor considered him for a moment. It's not about making up for the past. It's about what you choose to do with your future. As she walked away, she passed a memorial wall where photos of her fallen team members hung alongside hundreds of others. She touched Captain Miller's picture briefly, a private ritual of remembrance. Outside, the sun was setting over the park where it all began, a place forever changed, just like the community around it. Veterans live among us every day, at the grocery store, in your neighborhood, perhaps in your own family. Many never speak of their service or wear items that identify them as veterans. Have you ever discovered that someone you know served? Share your stories of veterans who made an impact on your community. Let's show our respect in the comments for those who sacrificed for our freedom, especially those whose service might not be immediately visible.